Hello friends, this is the Urdu Free Thinker. In this video, we will discuss a popular story of the Quran, the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is an Arabic word that literally means the one with two horns. This is a title the Quran gives to a historical figure, but his real name is not mentioned in the Quran. There is great controversy around who this person actually is, and who the Quran is actually referring to. In this discussion, we will show that he's none other than Alexander the Great. But before we dive into the controversy, let's summarize the story briefly. The Quran describes Dhul Qarnayn, or the one with two horns, as a great leader who God had given authority and a means to supremacy on earth. The story starts with him following a way until he reaches the place where he finds the sun setting in a spring of murky water. Around here, he provided justice to his subjects by either punishing them or forgiving them. The Quran doesn't really provide details to what this means. Anyhow, let's continue. Dhul Qarnayn then followed another way until he found himself at a place where the sun rises from, and he found it rising on a people that had no protection from the sun. Then he departed from those sun-scorched lands and followed another way that led him to a mountainous pass, and there he found another group of people. These people asked him for help against an evil nation, Gog and Magog. These people complained that Gog and Magog ravaged their lands, and that they could not defend themselves against such an onslaught. Dhul Qarnayn graciously accepted the request and constructed a gate of iron and lead. This gate was so strong that it permanently prevented Gog and Magog from attacking these people. But the story ends with a prophecy from Dhul Qarnayn, in which he predicts that a day will come when these gates will turn into dust, and the accursed nations of Gog and Magog will swarm the earth, destroying everything in their path, leading to an epic battle between good and evil before the end of times. The historical identity of this greatly successful king, the one who has two horns, has stirred a lot of controversy in the modern Islamic community. Historically, it was believed by many Islamic theologians that this tale's protagonist is Alexander the Great, but many modern scholars now have objections to this claim, and they propose that he is Cyrus the Great of Persia instead. Let's first look at the word and this peculiar title, Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn is composed of two words, Dhu, which is a possessive particle in Arabic and signifies possession, and Qarnayn, which is a dual form of the word Qarnun, meaning two horns. Dhu is a particle or word in Arabic that you can use to signify possession. Now, Arabic has other forms of possessive words like li or inda, which signify possession of objects or people. For instance, li akh, meaning I have a brother, or indi kitab, meaning I have a book. But these possessive particles are not used here by the Quran. But dhu is special. It is very formal, and it is used to show possession of permanent traits, attributes, or inherent qualities like having good morals, character, personality, or experience. For instance, rajulun zu mal means a man with money, or really a wealthy man, as an identifying attribute of the individual. Rajulun zu ilm means a man with knowledge, or really a knowledgeable man, as a quality of the individual. Rajulun zu sha'rin aswad, or a man with black hair, but really a black-haired man, as his permanent identifying trait. Therefore, Dhul Qarnayn means a person that has two horns, and the two horns are a fundamental part of his identity, or a fundamental part of his very being. It is well known that Alexander the Great, after conquering Egypt, assumed the title of Pharaoh, and was declared as the son of Amun by the Oracle of Delphi. Amun was an Egyptian god that was commonly depicted by horns of a ram. After Alexander became the son of Amun, He was depicted as having two horns by the currency drachma that circulated widely in the Middle East and Egypt after Alexander's death. After declaring himself as the son of Amun, the horns became a fundamental part of Alexander's identity. In the book History of Alexander the Great, being the Syriac versions of Pseudo-Callisthenes translated by Ernest Wallace Budge, the possessor of the two horns was a common nickname for Alexander in the ancient Near East. In fact, Ethiopian inscriptions always referred to him as the one with two horns. It is interesting to note that the earliest biography of the Prophet Muhammad, written by Ibn Ishaq, briefly alluded to the notion that Dhul Qarnayn was likely a Greek Egyptian in origin. This is a pretty good description for Alexander, as it acknowledges both the Greek roots of the man as well as the Egyptian roots of his horns. Whereas the belief that Dhul Qarnayn meant Alexander is an old one found in Islamic traditions, the notion that Dhul Qarnayn is Cyrus the Great is a new one, first proposed by the likes of Ma'dudi and Israr Ahmed, who were both South Asian in origin and from the late 20th century. The reason was primarily a theological one, as history began to show that Alexander was indeed a pagan and a bisexual or a homosexual. Muslim theologians took great offense to equate him as a prophet, and they looked for an alternative, and many proposed Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was a Persian emperor who had a vast empire stretching from the borders of India to Egypt. He's once depicted wearing a hem crown, which is an Egyptian ceremonial headgear, which gave many the impression that he's wearing two horns. The hem crown was a specific crown worn during ceremonies, originating from the 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt, about 1550 BC. This crown is a combination of the Egyptian Etif crown, which is a feathered crown of ancient Egyptian deity Osiris, the crown of Upper Egypt, and the Uraeus, an erect cobra, which is a symbol of the goddess Wajet, protector of the Lower Egypt. The theory that Dhul Qarnayn is Cyrus the Great has a major problem. While Alexander is definitely known by two horns of Amun as his unique quality for being the son of Amun, Cyrus's crown is a combination of two horns, two cobras, and a triple Atif ornament. Furthermore, apart from this crown, which is really a ceremonial headgear, there is no connection of any kind of horns with Cyrus the Great, and this crown is an object. It's not a trait or a quality. It is interesting to note that Dhul Qarnayn's story is not found anywhere in the Bible, but it is found in Syriac Christian legends regarding Alexander, and was circulating well before Islam. Ernest A. Wallace Budge summarizes these Syriac Christian tales. An exploit of Alexander, son of Philip of Macedon, shows how he went forth to the ends of the world and made a gate of iron, and shut it in the face of the north wind, so that the Huns might not come forth to spoil the countries. In this story, Alexander is depicted as a monotheist who believes in one God, and he asks for God's help to grant him supremacy on earth, and acknowledges that God has given him horns on his head. In this story, there is also a peculiar part where Alexander and his soldiers set sail and arrive at a place where he asks the governor if there is any need to deliver justice or punishment. And while Alexander was delivering justice, he was near a fetid, unpleasant body of water. Then Alexander went on another path, towards where the sun rises, and there he found a people living without protection from the sun, such that whenever the sun is about to rise, they flee away so they are not burnt by its rays. And then Alexander went on another journey and found himself in a mountainous terrain, where he met a group of people who complained about Gog and Magog. They said Gog and Magog are a nation so powerful and swifter than the wind that they can threaten the entire world. Alexander then subsequently commanded to construct an iron gate to keep the enemy at bay. And finally, Alexander delivers the prophecy that on the day of judgment, the accursed Gog and Magog will be free, and the earth will tremble with their presence. Now let us highlight the similarities between the Syriac Alexander legends and the Qur'an. Indeed, we established him upon the earth, and we gave him to everything away. Until he reached the setting of the sun, he found it set in a spring of murky water. Near it he found a people. We said, O Dhul Qarnayn, thou hast authority either to punish them or to treat them with kindness. Then he followed another way, until when he came to the rising of the sun, he found it rising on a people for whom we had provided no covering protection against the sun. Until when he reached a track between two mountains, he found beneath them a people who scarcely understood a word. They said, O Dhul Qarnayn, the Gog and Magog do great mischief on earth. Shall we then render thee tribute in order that thou might erect a barrier between us and them? Bring me blocks of iron. At length, when he had filled up the space between the two steep mountainsides, he said, Blow. Then when he had made it red as fire, he said, Bring me, that I may pour over it molten lead. He said, This is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord comes to pass, he will make it into dust, and the promise of my Lord is true. On that day we shall leave them to surge like waves on one another. The trumpet will be blown, and we shall collect them all together. Again, you can choose to believe in the Qur'an. That is entirely your choice, and I respect that. But know that the author of the Qur'an borrowed ahistorical myths circulating in the Christian communities at that time, and erroneously endorses a pagan as a prophet of a monotheistic God.